We tend to talk a lot about poop and gallbladders and guts and stuff like that, so I get a lot of questions about ox bile and TUDCA. So in this video, I want to break down the differences between ox bile and TUDCA, who they can really benefit and who might not want to use them at all. Let's jump in.
TC Hale is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
So to understand who should use ox bile or TUDCA, we really need to understand the purpose of bile in the body in the first place. So bile is made by the liver. It's like this soapy substance that the liver then sends down and it's stored in the gallbladder. And the gallbladder's job is to concentrate that bile so it can be more effective. And then the gallbladder holds on to it until it's called on, and then it squirts it down, and the bile comes down in here into the duodenum, or the duodenum if you really want to be cool and say it that way. But what happens is when we eat food, our stomachs make hydrochloric acid, or HCl, and that helps us acidify that food. And then once the food is acidified properly, it'll leave the stomach and come down here into the duodenum, and that acidity there is what triggers the gallbladder to squirt that alkaline bile down into the duodenum. So what that does is that helps us neutralize the acids that are leaving the stomach. And that's very important because if those acids don't get neutralized, they'll continue to digest your intestinal tract. That's not what the body wants. So we want that to be neutralized so that we don't create some type of loose stool issues and the body like, bring me all the water to cool this down and rush it out the back door and get crazy diarrhea issues. So that bile can be important for that regard. It also helps us really digest the food and bust it apart so we can get all the nutrients out of that food. It also is very important to help us emulsify or break down our dietary fats so the body can use those dietary fats. And also so we can access fat-soluble vitamins like A, E, D, and K. Those are kind of a big deal. And the other purpose of bile is really as a detox pathway. So people know that the liver filters junk out of the body, but most people don't know that the liver takes a lot of that junk and it puts it in the bile. So that when the bile is coming down here to neutralize these acids and help us emulsify our fats, it continues to carry those toxins through the intestinal tract so the toxins can go out the back door when we poop like a champion. So those are all very important factors when it comes to bile. So ox bile has become very popular for people to take if they've lost their gallbladder. If this gallbladder is removed, there is no storage for that bile, so you don't get the bolus of bile coming down when the acid leaves the stomach. Now bile can still come down from the liver down this biliary pathway and come through there, but it's kind of like this constant trickling. And that has the ability to create some symptoms for some people, but also you're not getting the bolus of bile to really help digest those foods correctly. So a lot of people who have lost their gallbladder will then supplement with ox bile to sort of synthesize that bile action that would have come down from the gallbladder, just to help them digest their food better, emulsify their fats, access fat-soluble vitamins, all those types of benefits. Another thing to consider is that it's very common today for someone's bile to become too thick and sticky to flow correctly. And then it's still not coming down. A person might still have their gallbladder, but the bile's not flowing down. So then they're like, oh, I get nauseous when I eat fats and I'm just not breaking food down correctly. So they may supplement with ox bile to replace that bile, and they may start to feel better. They may start to digest their food better. So there's some variations into which people might be using ox bile as it goes now. But what we want to understand is the difference between these two things is ox bile is derived from animal sources, and TUDCA is like a synthetic version of bile salts. So they are different in how they function, but if I have a client who's a vegan and doesn't want to use animal source products, I might have them use TUDCA if I feel like they need some help with bile helping the food to digest better. So that might be one reason that a person might want to use TUDCA instead of ox bile. But when we look at the differences, ox bile acts like bile. So it does all those things that bile does. It helps to neutralize any acids that are coming from the stomach, so that can be very important. It helps break down dietary fats and emulsify those fats. But it's not really doing the same detox as your own bile would. So if you're supplementing with ox bile, you're not helping the body detox correctly because your natural bile is not flowing. It's kind of stuck and backed up, and so the junk that the liver is filtering out is not getting taken out the back door. It's just kind of accumulating in the system, and then the person can become a little toxic, and that can create a wide variety of symptoms. But the most important thing about supplementing with ox bile is the timing, and most people do it wrong. Most people will follow the label on the manufacturer's bottle that says take this with your meal, and they'll take ox bile with their food. So when their food is supposed to be acidifying, they're putting ox bile in their stomach and neutralizing their stomach acids and turning off the digestive process. So that's a really big mistake. So we like to see people take ox bile away from their food. Now the dose and the timing is really going to vary from person to person in a big way, and we'll talk about that in a second, and I'll point you towards a video where I really dig into how to adjust the dose and the timing to figure out what's going to be right for you. But the biggest thing is you got to know not to take it with your food. It's a really big mistake, and it makes things worse for a lot of people. But we use this most when people have had their gallbladder removed. So when someone's had their gallbladder removed, we kind of feel like they need to use ox bile for the rest of their life, and that's just going to help them digest their food better because they don't have a place to store that bile anymore. Now some people will have enough bile flowing down here, even with the gallbladder gone, it's just kind of coming down all day long, that it kind of just works out. There's enough bile there to help emulsify the fats they need to. There's enough bile there to kind of neutralize the acids that are coming down. So they just kind of feel fine. Oh, I never felt better since I had my gallbladder removed. I'm so glad I did it. But a lot of people have a lot of symptoms. It seems to be like a 50-50 toss-up situation. But if someone is doing fine and they're not using ox bile, that's totally a possibility, and I think that that's okay. But most people who have these symptoms come up are going to have to use ox bile indefinitely. Now TUDCA, like we said, is a synthetic bile salt. And what we find is that it doesn't seem to neutralize acids the way that ox bile does. But it does seem to have the ability to help emulsify dietary fats, to help a person process their dietary fats a little bit better. And I've talked in other videos about, I'm not totally against somebody using TUDCA with a meal since it doesn't seem to be neutralizing acids the way that ox bile does. But a lot of people will tell you that TUDCA should be taken away from the meal just because it absorbs better that way. So it appears that both of these are better away from food, but for very different reasons. Now, the other thing about TUDCA, beyond the it doesn't seem to neutralize acids correctly, is that it seems to have a lot of other health benefits. And I'll put some links in the description below this video to some studies that kind of indicate some other benefits that TUDCA can really create. Things like improving insulin resistance and improving brain health and a lot of other health issues that can come about. It appears that TUDCA has the ability to create some improvement to a lot of things. I'm not going to dig into a lot of that because I just don't have a lot of experience using TUDCA for those purposes. I've only been using TUDCA for a few years, but mainly just to help people digest fats better. So you can dig into that research a little bit if you want to see some of those other benefits. But it's interesting to see that it seems to be a lot of other benefits that can come from supplementing with TUDCA away from your food. Now, if someone still has their gallbladder, I don't really like them to use these things. I like them to take steps to thin this bile out so that it will flow correctly and you'll have your natural bile function the way that the body is supposed to function. The body can do a lot of great things when we help it function the way that it's intended to. The body is smarter than we are, so I don't like to think that, oh, we can make this happen up here better than the body could do it. So I like to see clients take steps to thin that bile out when they still have their gallbladder so they won't need to take ox bile. And we'll put a link in the description below for our video on 5 steps to improve bile flow so you can dig in how to take those steps. Now, if someone doesn't have their gallbladder, this becomes very important. And also, it's okay for someone to use ox bile if they maybe haven't started taking steps to thin out the bile yet, and maybe they just need that ox bile as a temporary fix while they're taking steps to help the body function the way that it's supposed to function. Now, when we look at this dose and timing situation, it's really going to vary depending on how much stomach acid a person is making, how their stool is moving along, because ox bile has the ability to change the speed of that stool and the alkalinity or acidity of the stool that's moving through the system. And I'm not going to give you any brand to use. You're going to have to do your research there. In the description below, I'll put links to the ones that we use just so that you can see what we're using, because I know a lot of people are going to ask, but you're going to want to look at that and then do your own research to figure out what's going to be appropriate for you. Now, as far as the timing and the dose goes, it can be a little bit complicated for each person. So I made a whole video digging into this to help you walk through the process of figuring out what's going to work best for you. So jump over right now and check out that video on how to adjust the dose and timing of ox bile. I can't wait to hear about your results.